Hey guys, this is Miss Harrington again, and today we are going to go over a review skill in grammar, and this is something that you guys have heard and seen and practiced with for several years now, but we're going to review it in 5th grade because in 5th grade we're going to be doing a lot of writing, and we want your writing to be as strong as possible, and knowing how to correctly write sentences really does help your writing to be strong. So the first review skill that we're going to look at today is the difference between a complete sentence and what we call a sentence fragment. Now with this sentence fragment, that essentially means it is just a piece of a sentence, but it's missing something else to make it a complete sentence. So what I mean by that is a complete sentence has to have a subject and it has to have a predicate. Well, if it's a fragment, you may just have a subject, but no predicate. Or it could be the opposite of that. You may just have a predicate, but no subject. So what we're going to do on this practice page is we're going to identify which of these are fragments, which of these are actual sentences, and we're going to talk about why they're a fragment or why they are a sentence. So with this first sentence, all it says is without a word. Well, saying that out loud just seems incomplete. When I look at this, I realize I don't know who is saying anything without a word. So that tells me that this is missing a subject. So this would be what we would call a fragment. So I'm going to put an F on the line for fragment. The next sentence says, John ran. Now, some of you might easily want to say that that's a fragment just because it's so short. However, John is who the sentence is about. There's your subject. Ran is what he did. That's your predicate. It's a very simple sentence, but technically this is a complete sentence. So we're going to put an S on the line. We don't like that. Well, I know who this sentence is about. It's about we, so it has a subject. And I know something about we, that they don't like that, which means there is a predicate as well. So because there is a subject and because there is a predicate, this is a complete sentence also. Now, this one's a little bit tricky. This one says, carry that book. Now, some of you may look at this just based on what we've talked about on the first 3 sentences and say that that is not a complete sentence because there's no subject, like who is carrying that book? However, this could be considered a complete sentence because there's something called an understood you, which means it's not in the sentence, but if I were to look at you and say, carry that book, you know that I'm talking to you. So this is what we call an understood you. So really, this is a complete sentence. Now let's look at number 5, walking to the store. I know what someone is doing. Someone is walking to the store, but I have no idea who. Now, this would not be an understood you because it would make sense to say you walking to the store. So because this has a predicate but no subject because we don't know who's walking, this is a fragment. Number 6, I forgot. Again, this is a lot like number 2 at the top, very short and simple, but when we look at it, we have a subject, I, and we know what I did, forgot. So this is a complete sentence. Joe and Paul. Well, I know who this sentence should be about, Joe and Paul, but do we have any idea what Joe and Paul did, or do we know anything about Joe and Paul? No, so we're missing a predicate here. So this would be a fragment. We went outside. Well, it has a subject, we, I know who the sentence is about, and I know what they did, went outside. A subject and a predicate means it is a complete sentence. Number 9, Betty plays the piano. Well, I know who it's about Betty, there's my subject, and I know something about Betty. I know that she plays the piano. Subject, predicate means we have a complete sentence. Hardly a thought. Well, we have no idea who had hardly a thought. There is no subject. This only is a predicate piece. So because it's missing a subject, this is a fragment. And then the last one, prevent her from going. Well, prevent is an action verb, which means this is actually beginning your predicate because we don't know who is preventing her from going, which means there is no subject. So if there's not a subject and a predicate, this is a fragment. So this is our review on the difference between a complete sentence and a fragment. Again, if it doesn't have a subject or if it doesn't have a predicate, it is a fragment. So now we're going to look at one more review skill that kind of goes along with this, and this is what we call run-on sentences. When sentences just seem to keep going and going, and they're not separated or punctuated correctly. So read this review sentence with me at the top. It says a run-on sentence is a sentence with at least two independent clauses, which are complete thoughts, which are forced together instead of being properly connected. To correct these sentences, you have several options. You could separate the clauses using punctuation, so periods, commas, things like that. You could separate them using conjunction words like coordinating conjunctions, even subordinating conjunctions. Or you could rearrange the sentences. When you do this, you may have to add or remove some words for it to make sense once you correct it. So look at this example sentence. He put on some sunscreen. The sun was so extremely hot and he wanted to go inside. It just seems to keep going and going. So look how we broke apart this run-on sentence. So technically this sentence has three separate clauses, three separate complete thoughts. He put on some sunscreen. The sun was so extremely hot. He wanted to go inside. Well, we can't just force, like the direction said, we can't just force these sentences together. There are certain ways we have to put these thoughts together to make a complete sentence. So look at how we fixed it. He put on some sunscreen because, there's your subordinating conjunction, the sun was extremely hot, period. He wanted to go inside. So we took the first two clauses and we connected them correctly with a subordinating conjunction. And then we ended the first two clauses with a period and created a separate sentence for that third clause. So let's look at a couple of notes, just things to remember before we look at two examples. Just because a sentence is long does not necessarily mean it is a run-on. I know sometimes we see really long sentences and we want to assume that it's a run-on, but that's not necessarily true. Some long sentences are grammatically correct, while some short sentences are run-on. So keep that in mind. Just because it's long does not mean it is a run-on. Another thing to remember, simple short sentences are the easiest to read and understand. So you don't want your sentence to be very wordy just to say you put a lot of information and a lot of words in it. Sometimes, have you ever heard the saying, short, sweet, short and simple, to the point? Sometimes that's the best way to write your sentences in your writing. So let's look at the directions. We're going to try to correct the following run-on sentences. Let's look at number one. My mother and father and sister are coming to dinner tonight. Well, automatically, when I read that, I feel like there are too many of these coordinating conjunctions and. So I feel like I could remove one of those and add some punctuation in the sentence to make the sentence correct. So for this sentence, when I think punctuation, I'm thinking commas. When you have a list of items in your sentence. In this sentence, we have a list of people, mother, father, sister. So I'm going to correct this run-on by taking out one of these conjunctions and adding some commas. So I'm going to say my mother, comma, father, comma, and sister are coming to dinner. Now my sentence makes more sense and it is correctly written. So let's look at the second example. I like learning English, it makes me tired. Well, the way that you read that obviously sounds like those two thoughts are just smushed together. And they're kind of opposite thoughts, right? Like you're telling me that you like English, you're also telling me it makes you tired. So again, they're like two opposite thoughts. So when I think of combining these sentences, I think of creating a compound sentence, so coordinating conjunction, one of those fanboy words. And when I think of my choices of coordinating conjunctions, when I think of two opposite thoughts being combined together, I think of the coordinating conjunction but. So watch how I correct this sentence. I'm going to say, I like learning English, comma, because it's a compound sentence, but it makes me tired. Now I have two correctly written sentences.